God bless the cipher, the rotation. God bless the beatboxer's lungs, amen for breath control, the smiles that pry open faces when flow goes unbroken, and the smoke. To stories you can see, to coming in on the one. Let's take you on a time jump, virtual zoom, bringing it back to Theodore's bedroom. These hands are passionately polysyllabic, putting the Jeopardy theme on swings. 10 dons giving predictions, balancing vibes like the sons and daughters of Ipwan. Ear to the ear to the underground, flicking off peppermint, fresh experiment. Let's go, El Premier Elemento. You gotta take your time, press your fingers to the line. Red man, focus your mind. And once you do that, you're at the front of the combine. Some ideas, they shake you out of your sleep like when a toddler creeps. Totality of the deep, the mere thought of an unconscious manifestation carried out with the beat. Positive charged protons creating neural explosions. Time hiccups when fingers and pads touch. Dead air smiles because it knows what's coming. The countenance of the clock claps hands. The choreography of the knot slaps jams. And you be like, who made this? Vertebrae responding to the call so bad to make a B-girl curve the wall.
What's going on, family? It's yours truly, Mazi Mutafa. I'm super excited to be here on a Friday with one of my best inspirations, a brother by the name of Bushhead Ed. If you're a University of Maryland alumni, you know WMUC. If you listen to WPFW on, hopefully I didn't mess it up. If you listen to WPFW every second Saturday, he's there representing the SoulControllers. And if you're a person that shops at DTLR and when you walk in and hear that music playing, Ed is responsible for that. So either thank him or blame him. Either one. He's Ed. What's going on, Brother Smith?
Oh, what's good with you, Mozzie, man? I appreciate that, man. Happy to be here with you, man. Thanks for having me on.
No doubt. It's crazy to me that we're having this conversation because for people that don't know that we've been doing this creative economy curriculum for a couple of years, you've actually been a part of that work. I want to say for like the program is 6 years old. I think you've been working with us for 5 on it.
Yeah.
Specifically training young people and interns on how to do podcasting.
Right. We, what's great is the technology that's involved in podcasting is really tied to the same equipment that you'd use for radio production. So they all kind of fall in my skill sets, and happy to help out with those. But yeah, we've been doing some pretty cool work putting together these podcasts for and showing the kids how to actually put all these things together, how to get the equipment going, how to use a little bit of it, and how to assemble it all. It shouldn't just be locked up in the knowledge of one engineer's head. Love being able to sort of teach folks how that goes.
No doubt. And you do a great job of it. And so I'm especially happy to have you here. Is my Wi-Fi slow?
No.
Okay.
Can you hear me? I got you.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just making sure. I'm especially happy to have you here because both. You know what's funny? I had a plan coming into this.
Okay.
And then you've got a set behind you that I wasn't anticipating, filled with Transformers of various kinds.
Yes.
I'm curious. So are you a collector?
I am very much a collector. I was 9 years old when Transformers came out, and they kind of took over my whole toy obsession. I was into G.I. Joes. I was into like little figures and Star Wars and stuff like that. But something about Transformers, man, they did it for me. And the robot part of them, the computer part of them, the backstory that Marvel Comics came up with for them, all of those things, they just studio. And this is my my radio studio that I put together for when my DJ crew started working on our radio show. After we left WMUC in 2000. And so this studio and this space, this sort of creative space was about trying to find some inspiration in the same sort of energy that you had when you were a kid. When you're a kid, like the world was kind of limitless. And so I kind of try to tap into some of that creative energy from when you're a kid imagining, whole worlds when we do our radio show. So there are different toys in here that when cats would come into the studio, be it my SoulControllers or Odyssey, Kev Brown, whoever would drop through, someone would pop in and be like, "Yo, I had that," or "I wanted that." And so yeah, the ones in the back, they just don't fit on the main shelf. 180 degrees behind this camera, there's actually a whole display of a few hundred I've collected over the years. So
Wow.
it's a little obsessive.
That's what's up.
Yeah, but it's a thing that sort of keeps me young. And one thing specifically I love about Transformers is kind of like the puzzle piece of them. I love like challenges, and so that whole thing about going from robot to its alternate mode. It's they say puzzles help keep your brain sharp and stuff like that. And so I really think like Transformers are kind of a fun puzzle trying to figure out how you get them from mode 1 to mode 2, especially like the ones they're making now that have like 60 pieces or 60 steps to get them from robot to alt mode.
Well, this is a great metaphor because the whole idea of this interview is to build a puzzle of how it is that you've become the person you are. And so I wonder, you're the second person in this series, is the alternative winter break. And rather than just talking to people about their careers, I'm trying to learn more about people's families, their histories, the people that helped to shape them. And so I wonder, how much of your family history do you know? Like, how far back do you have knowledge of your family?
My dad has done some genealogy studies, and he's able to go back several generations. And so I've seen a family tree, but the family I know the most about is actually my mom's side, but only about a generation or two back. So I get to my grandparents' generation, and that's about it right now. What's funny is I've been watching Skip Gates' show, Finding Your Roots, and when he's able to show his guests these trees going back, hundreds of years, it's amazing to me. So I know there's some genealogists in my family, and I have a pretty large family on my mom's side, and at least a couple of those cousins are into the genealogy. So I think I'm gonna have to dig in a little bit more, in days to come.
That definitely sounds like a plan. So tell me a little bit about,
I think, I have, if I go back far enough in what I know of my genealogy, I know that my mom is one of 16 kids, and the 16 of them had 45 of us. And so large family, and so there's all kinds of interest there within our family, and so there is a genealogist or two amongst them, and I think I need to eventually tap into her and see what she's talking about, see what she knows, and see how far we can go back.
That sounds like a really great puzzle to begin to put together. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I'm an only child, so I am the only child from my mom and dad's marriage. I do have some half siblings, but they were all adults by the time I was born. So in my household growing up, I was pretty much the only child, and I tend to think of myself as the only child. But I do have one half sibling or one half brother on my mom's side. I have I think 5 half siblings on my dad's side. But yeah, for the most part, we were my family, and I sort of grew up in a single parent household. We were the only members of our family that were in this region, so I didn't see them a lot. They were spread to the 5 winds, and so I kind of grew up as the only child, even though I have all these sort of large familial connections.
Well, so where were you born?
I was born at Walter Reed Army Medical Hospital in DC. It was still in DC at the time. It has since moved to Bethesda, and I grew up in Montgomery County in Glenmont, and then about 9 years old, I moved to Greenbelt. Family moved to Greenbelt, and so I am DMV kind of through and through.
And so we were born in DC, and you were here with both your parents?
So my parents, they were separated for most of their marriage. They were only married about 10 years, and my dad, he worked for Blue Cross up in but was working out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So he was spending a lot of his days up there in the office. And in fact, I rarely remember and I barely have any memories of seeing my mom and dad together. I know, if I go through it, the day they got divorced is the only time I can remember that I've ever seen them in the same room together. And that was like second grade, like 1982, 1983. So, yeah, I've always sort of thought of them as, sort of separate on their own islands. But, they obviously were together for at least one night.
Out of curiosity, because if your answer to this question is Arrowhead Elementary School, I'm gonna be like, what? Where'd you go to elementary school?
I went to several different elementary schools. I went to Saddlebrook Elementary in Glenmont. Went to Grace Episcopal Day School for second, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. I went to Glen Allen Elementary School in Silver Spring in third grade. So we bounced around. I bounced around a lot. I went from public schools to private schools. And about third grade, I had this issue with a bully, and was trying to avoid him. I ended up getting hit by a car. And at that point, my mom got me the heck out of Montgomery County. Apparently, Montgomery County was too rough and tumble for me, and Glenmont was too hardcore. So we moved to PG County and to Greenbelt, and from there I was doing the commute with her. She was working in Rockville, so I'd ride with her every day to the Grace Episcopal Day School over in. They were on Connecticut Avenue in Silver Spring at the time. They are still there to this day. And so, yeah, private school.
I was asking because when I was a kid, I had the opportunity to go to Arrowhead Elementary School because I lived in Greenbelt, Maryland when I moved back to the States from Germany.
Okay.
Shout out to DJ Book for giving you some love on social.
What up, Book? That's like one of my DJ inspirations to this day. DJ Book, he was the first cat I saw that we called it at the time, he mixed dyslexic style, meaning that he would fade to the right to go to the left turntable. He would fade to the left to go to the right turntable. And when I saw him do it, I was like, physics-wise, the way your body moves, the kinetics of it all, it made total sense. But none of the other DJs in our crew did it, and they all called it like his dyslexic style. But and I don't think he's dyslexic. I think that's just, the movement of it was counterintuitive.
He has many styles.
Right. The style was counterintuitive. So when I started learning how to DJ, when I finally got my turntables, the first thing I did was sort of emulate him. So DJ Book is one of my idols and really part of the reason, he's a big part of my personal radio background.
Well, before we jump all the way to your radio background, so we're still back in elementary school. I'm curious, are there teachers or mentors or adults who you can think back to as being really integral in the shaping of the way you thought about yourself and your future, particularly in the school years?
You said particularly in which years?
The elementary school.
Oh, elementary school. Okay, yeah. So in elementary school, a couple of my biggest influences, that sort of drive even to this day, the things I do was Mrs. Wilson. She was our music teacher at Grace. And her husband was the choir master at Grace Episcopal Church. So the two were connected. And one day he came into our class, or I think it was fourth grade class, and we didn't know, but he was pretty much auditioning the class. He was asking, listening to the kids sing, and some were doing solos and stuff like that. And he ended up inviting some of the kids he heard to the choir. And so that started this whole thing for probably 4 or 5 years after that, where I was singing all the time. I was in this big choir at Grace Church, and we'd go to the cathedral and we'd sing all around town. And so that's kind of like part of my music foundation comes from that plug of Mrs. Wilson. But there was also Mrs. Sanders. She was my computer teacher. She was the computer teacher at the time, and she kind of saw the potential in me. They had these Commodore computers around there, the Commodore 64. And once I got my own and had it working at home, that would be the homework I'd pay the most attention to. That'd be the thing I'd be messing around with, even if it wasn't homework. So I'd go into class and have those computers doing things that I'd learned how to do at home. And she'd be like, oh, that's pretty impressive. So a couple of them that encouraged me along the way. There was also like the computer and music teachers, they were kind of the biggest influences because it still kind of connects to what I do today.
I mean, that's really important just for adults who engage with young people to realize how big an impact you can have on someone's life so early.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we get into my later years. There's a specific teacher who, sort of like at the top of when I won my Emmy in 2007. Like I think she was the one teacher I thought of to think. It's like Mrs. Hamilton, my high school video production teacher. She's like really the plug.
That is what's up. So I'm here with Bushhead Ed, DTLR radio operations manager, talking about his journey to reach where he is right now. And I wonder, we stopped in elementary school. So I've learned a bunch about you, including the schools you went to, some of the early influences being around choir, but then also around technology and this idea of learning independently and then being able to come to school to share that. So was there anybody that was integral in middle school?
Middle school, I went to St. John's on Military Road in Northwest, and there was a teacher. I want to say his name was Mr. Colvin. He was our computer teacher there, and so he was another one of those cats that by this time we reached 7th, 8th grade. That's what middle school was at the time. He saw that I was kind of an advanced student. Like we were literally sharing software. Like here I am, I'm 13 years old, and we're clicking on these, we're clicking around on these Radio Shack TRS-80s that are the main computer that the school has issued to the students or that they're using in the computer lab there. But he knew that, I was using Commodores at home, and there were a couple of Commodores in there, and all the programming challenges he'd give us, they'd be super easy. I'd knock them out in like 3 minutes. So he was like, okay, you're kind of an advanced student, so we're going to find a way to make this more interesting for you. And so Mr. Colvin looked out there and sort of encouraged and again saw that I was kind of an advanced computer nerd, and that the basic stuff that they were teaching to the students there wasn't going to be, what really engaged me or helped me grow. So yeah, Mr. Colvin in middle school.
Were there talented and gifted programs for computer science then?
There weren't. I mean, I think, all of that was, we're talking the mid to late 80s, the early 90s. And so one thing I kind of always acknowledge is that I think I might have been born 10 years too early. Because all of the really cool computer stuff, and if you're a computer student now, there's I think lots more opportunities now. If you're computer savvy, there are like lots more advanced classes, and there are teachers who know it and can keep up with you. But yeah, I was there when computer programming classes were a new thing, and so the teachers were kind of just learning stuff. I can go to several moments in my education where I probably knew more than the teachers about a certain thing that a computer could do, be it a program or how it actually worked.
How do you think that impacted your self-esteem, this idea that the people that are responsible for teaching you actually knew more than them?
It didn't hurt. I went to years later, I'm jumping around here, but there was a point where I went to DINFOS, the Defense Information School, once I joined the Army. And
no, you jumping too fast.
I'm jumping too far, but it does help because, one of the things that they said about me is, I was kind of anxious to sort of mentor folks or even if there were students who didn't know, basically they were saying, he was happy to show us stuff. He was happy to keep the students up to speed or to bring them along. So if anything, I guess it helped boost my confidence a bit about the things that I know I'm good at. If I'm not a super athlete or something like that, I kind of got confidence in at least that part of my persona. I knew I was a pretty strong computer nerd.
Were there people outside of school that encouraged you in this space? Like, did your mom know about this?
Yeah, mom and dad, dad was the wallet. So he's the one who's making sure I'm staying deep in computers. He's making sure I have computers at the crib. So, I remember he gave me some Timex computer, some little small mini computer that I think I broke really quickly. And but he was always getting me new ones. I was getting new computers. So there was Big 20s. Commodore's little brother was the Commodore 64's little brother was this computer called the Big 20. So he got me one of those. And then when I kind of did everything I could with that one, he got me the 64. So he kept me tight on the computers, kept computers coming into the house. And Mom, what she did do was, in her way, she kind of kept me isolated enough to get into all of this stuff. So, she is super overprotective of me. And, she didn't like me being out the house. So she kind of kept me comfortable in the crib. And so, she didn't want me running around with the knucklehead kids. So she'd make sure that, if I'm staying in the house all day, that, I got things to keep me occupied. So she's the one who's pushing for me to have computers and boom boxes and things like that sort of like keep me comfortable in my while I'm on permanent lockdown. So yeah, she knew about it, and she would see these things, and she certainly encouraged it. But she's also sort of responsible for me locking myself away into learning all these things that I'm picking up. So where I'm saying I'm doing this independent learning part of it is because I'm also like not outside in the streets running around. She did this other thing, and we're going to private school in Montgomery County, living in PG County, and so if we didn't have the money to go into the after school programs in Grace, she would take her lunch hour and come pick me up from school and would drop me off at one of the local Montgomery County libraries there. And this was sort of a new thing that some parents were experimenting with, and a lot of kids would be sort of rambunctious and loud, and the librarians were not crazy about these kids running around high school or running around the library. But I would go in, and I just know that like I don't want to be an embarrassment. So I would go into class, I would go into the library and just hang out there, and whatever subject crossed my mind, there'd be 100 things that I'd fall into these rabbit holes almost every day. I wasn't necessarily doing schoolwork or homework, but I'd fall into a different rabbit hole every day about different subjects. Again, more puzzles. Like, I'm reading a comic book, and instead of like thinking about the story, I'm thinking like, how do you make a comic book? What does printing look like? How do you make the paper for it? What are these dots? What are these red, yellow, and dots? How are they separated into these? Like, so I'd like learn about processes or see a picture of a hologram and find out how do you do photography? So it'd be like one thing after another. It's like, let me just jump into one book. So I was always kind of around libraries and books. And so that was a thing that she did that, actually did help drive me into being the brainiac that I was at that time.
I'm curious, did video games play any role in your childhood? You haven't mentioned any at all, so I'm just curious.
So yeah, that was definitely a sort of ongoing thing. It carried on from we were doing that at Grace, and then when I went to St. John's for junior high school, middle school, the same thing was happening again there, where I would.
All right, so we just lost Bushhead, but I'm sure he'll be back in a quick second. If you're just tuning in, my name's Mazi Mutafa, Executive Director of Words, Beats, and Life. This is part of the Alternative Winter Break, inaugural Alternative Winter Break Media Arts Edition. We're interviewing Bushhead Ed, talking a little bit about his childhood and his experience, and we're getting up to the point where we're about to be in high school. Part of the reason why we're asking people to frame the work they do in their kind of life's journey is that part of the challenge for being an adult that cares about young people is recognizing that you don't have to necessarily be an expert in the thing that they're an expert in to be able to encourage them. And so we want to have people tell their stories, to talk about teachers, to talk about parents, to talk about family members who've played a role in helping to direct their journey. And we think that's really important, mostly because none of us got to where we are by ourselves. And so Bushhead is telling his story, particularly right now, we're at high school, talking about the role that particular folks have played in his life. I love the fact that I asked you, but I guess you couldn't hear me, Bushhead. Did video games play any kind of role in your life as a kid? Because you're talking about comic books, you're talking about all the things, but I haven't heard you say anything about video games.
Oh, absolutely. Like video games were a huge thing. That's that computer part. So you got a Commodore 64 and, pre-internet, you would have a modem and you'd like dial up, go to bulletin board systems and start learning how to download games from those bulletin board systems. They'd be like, I think the statute of limitations has expired here, but yeah, we used to download a lot of like cracked software and cracked video games. So I'd always be playing, the latest video games. Again, it's sort of like part of that permanent lockdown that, in order to be comfortable in the house, mom made sure I had a good computer connection. So I'd be on the phone using the modem all night, downloading video games and playing those. So yeah, I had a lot of games. I wasn't necessarily a great player, but I had a lot of games and was always playing them. But at a certain point, again, it was more like the puzzle part of it wasn't so much how to win the game, but like, how did this game get written? So it would end up being like an investigation, like, how does the code behind this game work? And so it would also inspire like, more research. It's kind of why I became why I started really getting into like coding, writing machine language, and digging deeper into like my programming stuff, trying to figure out how the sprites work and the things that allow computers to detect that your punch hit your opponent or that your car ran off the road. So it's like, how does the computer figure that out? And so yeah, that part.
So because you keep talking about things like permanent lockdown, it's so funny. I on Facebook, I've been writing a lot about how more children need to be put on punishment,
Mhm.
not because they did something wrong, but just because they need to be used to being inside, to have to do some other stuff. Because I spent most of my childhood on punishment for having done stuff.
Yeah.
I wonder, when you were a kid, how'd you think about yourself? Like being this kid that was studying coding and studying like the intricacies of how to make comics, etc. How did you actually think about yourself?
Um, yeah, I was, pretty confident in the fact that I was a brainiac, a bit of a nerd. I tried to balance it out. Yeah, I say like, when I talk about how hip hop saved my life, we talk about that a lot in our little hip hop circles here. We talk about how hip hop saved my life. What ended up helping me save my life is I was enough of a hip hop nerd as well that I could get into conversations with folks about rap music, and they, that might encourage them to or discourage them from stuffing me in the locker as a nerd. So, I was able to balance it out. But yeah, I was pretty confident in the fact that, I was a bit of a brainiac and a geek, but not in a bad way. But there was definitely a time when, like, the Revenge of the Nerds era where, being a geek, a nerd was darn near the worst thing you could be.
Well, so we were talking a little bit about transitions in high school, and so what classes were relational? Sorry, what classes were really transformational in high school for you? Did you get
Um,
any of that?
yeah, I got transformational classes in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took a lot of computer science classes, or I took computer science classes like the first 2 3 years. But the class that really changed everything, just to jump to it, was video production. It was my senior year, and at the end of my junior year, I was in good enough standing that I had to pass a fourth year of English and 3 electives to graduate. So, I signed up for a whole bunch of classes just to sort of pad my transcripts. And one of them I kind of just indulged, curiosity was video production. I was enough into music and hip hop at the time that I was, had there been, I'm looking at this, WBL promo that you had at the top of the show there, the beat making class. If there was something like that, there was a WBL Academy in 1991, then I would have been all over that beat class, man. But there wasn't anything like that at on the Roosevelt High School. So the closest I could get to a production class was video production, and that class like really changed everything. It's like kind of what put me. There's a direct line to everything I'm doing now that comes from that video production class. I signed up for it, or we started that first semester that senior year, and about a week after school started, I went on a vacation with my mom to like the Florida Panhandle with some of her siblings. So it's a whole bunch of the Jones siblings and me, to the only one of us cousins, us next generation there. So I'm the only kid there, and about all I have with me are my textbooks and a paperback. So I read through most of that video production textbook, and I read the autobiography of Malcolm X while I was out there. And both of those books kind of changed everything for me. So yeah, that video production class was definitely it.
So here's a question that's interesting. Did you actually go to College Park? I know you were at WMUC, but did you actually go to College Park?
No, I went to Morehouse.
What?
I went to.
You was up there using my student resources, and you didn't even go there.
Well, that's the the beauty of that was that the MUC was sort of a volunteer thing. There are a whole bunch, I think, of folks who didn't actually have any connection to the school who were up there. They were either graduates or they were just sort of vagabonds like me off the street. I went to Morehouse in 1992, and while I was there, first holiday I came home, I found out that one of my classmates from Roosevelt was DJing a show up there. This kid's name Dan Archer, aka DJ Van Dan, and he had joined this show that had debuted the year earlier called the SoulController Mix Show. So there were 3 or 4 of them that did the show, worked on it. It aired every Friday from 6 to 9 p.m. And first time my buddy Cornell, who was another fellow Raider, we all graduated from Roosevelt together in '92. Told me, like, Dan's got this show that's playing the hip hop. We really mess with, because at that point, if you were a real hip hop head, you really didn't like what was on commercial radio. Commercial radio was playing garbage hip hop and garbage rap music. Hip pop, we used to call it, and the only real stuff was like stuff you had to dig to find, and it was before the internet, so you'd had to like find like a video show or a college show or something like that. And so I would come home for holidays and I'd hang out at MUC, and then when I finally finished up in Atlanta, when I finally left Morehouse in '96, that's when I really started hanging out there regularly. Came home back to PG County, and where I lived in PG County, I lived in Greenbelt. So, it's like 10 minutes from College Park. So I'd be out there pretty much every Friday, just hanging out with the crew there. And so, yeah, that was how I ended up being at Maryland and at MUC all the time. So yeah, I spent a lot of time there, but I was never, ever a Terrapin. But I have gone to like a couple of your homecoming games, and, I root for the Terps a little bit.
Did we miss something? When did you enlist in the military?
After my freshman year of college. So I did a year at Morehouse, and my first year at Morehouse was terrible academically. Socially, it was very interesting, but I was such a, like I said, that permanent lockdown manifested itself as me wilding out when I got to Atlanta, and trying to be a social butterfly, and like the academics kind of fell to the side. So I had a really bad academic year. Came home after my freshman year and did a semester at Prince George's Community College, and even that was not going really well. Like, I just really wasn't focused. I wasn't getting, the discipline just wasn't there. Like, as a college student, I had a part-time job at a record store. I'd rather be at the record store than be in class. So it's like, something's wrong here. And so I decided to get my butt kicked, and I joined the Army in February of 1994. So yeah, I literally like dropped all my classes in what was going to be my second semester at Prince George's Community College, dropped all my classes, and shipped out to Fort Jackson, did 2 months of basic training. Then I went to Fort Gordon, which is in Georgia, outside of Augusta, and did another 6 months training there. And from there, I was in the reserves. And so another reason I would come home and do, hang out with the SoulControllers up at MUC was because I would drive home once a month for my drills. I'd have to drive up from Atlanta to DC to come do drill stuff. And I was stationed at Fort Belvoir. And so, yeah, every month I'd be back up here. And if I got into town early enough, I might go up to MUC again then. But yeah, I was in the Army I was in the reserves for 8 years, from 94 till 02.
And so, did you wind up finishing college, or just went into the world of work?
I went into the world of work. I went through ultimately, I guess, 6 semesters of college, but after, I kept running into money problems. Like trying to actually pay for Morehouse was an adventure, and so I did about 4 actual semesters there and the 2 semesters at PG. And at a certain point, I was like, yo, I'm having a really hard time paying for this. And I think I should probably like put this to the side for a little bit. And so I went to work and I got a job at a TV station that actually was in Greenbelt, a low power station, WIAV, Channel 58, and started it's sort of like their ground level as a master control operator. So that's the video switcher, and I just sit there and monitor the TVs and figure out when to manually insert the TV commercials and switch between the different shows. So did that for a number of years. And it just kept going like, oh yeah, the next step, here's another TV opportunity, this job, that job. And so at a certain point, it's like, oh yeah, you know what, I actually kind of have a career now. And surprise, it's not even what I was studying in school. I went to Morehouse as a computer science major, and it just so happened that all of the work I was doing out in the real world was related to broadcasting, television, radio. I interned at 1580 at WPGC's AM station. It was a hip hop station at the time in 1995. I interned there. I was working at TV stations. Even in the Army, I'd gone in as an electronic repair person. And then by like year 3, I ended up in the public affairs detachment doing TV production. So like everything was pointing me in the direction of TV. So I went for one thing, but civilian world and things happening in my real life were actually pushing me in this whole other direction that kind of ends up, feeding my being more aligned with my creative passions.
I mean, do you feel like, because I listened to your story, this idea that you began as a young person just kind of interested in how things work, how
Mm-hmm.
things are made, how they're produced, how they're shared. This idea of breaking down comic books, breaking down computers and programs, just solving problems, built like connecting, making connections between things that should be connected and maybe things that don't seem like they connect. Um, then being encouraged to be creative in things like choir, and then um, doing kind of computer science work on your own. And then you go to college where it's a bit different than what it is. I know I jumped some stuff, but then you get to college and it's a bit different because now you're not on team lockdown anymore. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
what's happening out here in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And so then you decide to institute a kind of new discipline on yourself by joining the armed forces. Finish that as a reserve member, come out into the work world. And I forgot, you also, while you were in college, was it during college you said you worked in a record store?
Yeah, that was definitely a part-time job. I think during my first semester at home after at Prince George's Community College at PG, I wanted to make some money, and so I got a job at Waxy Maxie's in Beltway Plaza. So I don't know if any of y'all remember Waxy Maxie's. It became FYE before it became nothing. And but yeah, that was a place again. It said that other side, the music love for me. I was spending a lot of my check on stuff that came into the shop. So I was kind of giving my paycheck right back to the store a lot. But being around that music, was another thing that just sort of motivated me and kept me wanting to learn how to make music. Like my ambitions in hip hop, were all kind of being fed by being in that space as well. So yeah, working in a record store, that was definitely and it was a thing that I returned to. Like I had a good enough relationship with the managers there that I might go to when I did go back to Morehouse in '95 when I came home that summer. I had my plugs at Waxy Maxie were still there, and they're like, yeah, come on. And I think that summer I probably had I was interning at WPGC. I was putting in some hours at Waxy Maxie's, and I was delivering pizzas at Domino's. So I was making some money, and I was having some fun in the thing that I was most passionate about, music and all that good stuff.
And so you mentioned Soul Controllers and getting excited about this crew, but where does that fall in in where we're talking about right now. So is that pre-Waxy Maxi or post-Waxy Maxi?
So Waxy Maxi, like it was just it was sort of a summer job. The Waxy Maxis, I was there in '95. In matter of fact, that year in '95, when I came home from college, um, I would work my schedule so that I could take Friday evenings off and go up to MUC. So they were kind of both concurrent. I was doing Wax Maxi as kind of a summer job. I might do some weekend hours there in between Domino's and PGC, and have some hours there and still be able to buy some records. But yeah, I would make sure that I had Friday nights off so that I could go over to MUC and hang out with at that time it was Book, Jay LaRock, Van Dan. I think that was even before Stylus was there. But yeah, we'd be out there, if I could help it, I'd be out there every Friday, hanging out at SoulControllers. So that was becoming one of the more important things in my world from the time that I first discovered them, first found out about them to, really to the present. The SoulController has always kind of been a big part of my interest set.
I'm curious, for people that don't necessarily know who the SoulControllers are, can you tell us a little bit about the collective?
Sure. So SoulControllers was founded in 1991, September of 1991. So that puts us in, I guess we're approaching 20 or 30 years this September coming up. And it was a hip hop show. It's originally on Friday nights, started by a collective of 3 University of Maryland students. The J, Dominator, Shortcut, and the 3 of them started the show in 1991. They actually sort of took over a show that had been there that was trying to do a hip hop show, but it wasn't quite right. So they're like, "Oh, can we help out? Can we help you out, make this a better show?" And so they came in, they brought their flavors, and it just started, accelerating from there. We brought in, they brought in Van Dan. Like I said, he was the cat from Roosevelt, who was kind of my intro into SoulControllers. They looked around, found Town, and Book was a cat who was interested in what they were doing, and so they added him to the collective. And it just sort of grew. If you went up to MUC on Friday nights, in that period, the way MUC studio is set up, there's the control room, and then there's this big sort of open space where the turntables are set up, and it was like the best hip hop lounge in town. Like there'd be some couches in there, and there'd be a whole bunch of hip hop heads just talking about best MC, best DJ, best producers. Cats would bring up, all the issues of the Source and rap pages and whatever other hip hop press was out at that time, and like it just be hip hop church for 3 hours on Friday, and so it drew in a lot of folks, and it was just a really cool place to hang out. By the time I was there in the summer of '95, the homie Rome Anderson, aka DJ Stylus, he was getting in the mix there. Mark Harrison, aka DJ Mr. Elite, he was hanging out there a bit. Stylus brought in a young artist named Aaron Magruder, and he was working on a comic strip called The Boondocks that was happening on campus, and that was running in the Diamondback newspaper there, that was at the time being edited by Jason Blair, who would end up being this shameful journalist at the New York Times, and so it just kept growing. Peter Rosenberg was a fan of the show when he was a student over at Bethesda Chevy Chase. So he would, when he came and went to Maryland somewhere in the late '90s, he would say that SoulControllers was like one of his big inspirations, and so. And he actually had a show that was on like immediately after ours. And
real quick, DJ Book chimed in and said, "Hey Ed, you have to mention that cassette mixer turntable that you invented."
Yes, that's the thing. So I didn't have a record collection. I while I'm on lockdown, as a kid, I just had my tape decks. I had these, I'd record blank tapes, I'd get blank tapes, and I'd just like record all my songs out the radio. And so my collection was more of a cassette collection than it ever was a vinyl collection. And so I had all these awesome songs on there, but you needed records to mix. And so I'm like, no, I got all these tapes, and for all the things I'm curious about, I don't know how to make a lathe and press records. So I was like, maybe there's something I can do with these tapes. And so started hacking around. I'd go to stores. Again, another puzzle. Here's the next puzzle. So I'd go to stores and get like Walkman, or I guess Walkman is a brand name, but I'd get like little portable cassette players, and try to figure out how I could hack them, bash them, kit bash them into something that would let me do mixes. And so if you do enough research, you can figure out that inside every tape player is a little speed control that's calibrated at the factory so that it all plays at the same pitch, but you could replace that little resistor with a bigger resistor and kind of become a pitch control for it. And some tape decks have a auto reverse or a reverse function, so that it plays side A and then goes backwards and plays side B. And you could actually fix the playhead so that it doesn't switch from side A to side B. And so now you press it forward, it plays forward, and then when you hit it backwards where it would normally flip side B, instead of just playing side A backwards. And so it's like, okay, I got a way to jog the speed and or jog back and forth. I can adjust the speed. And so I was really just trying to emulate all the functions that I was seeing Book and the rest of these cats doing on their turntables. So even doing like a switch to so me and Radio Shack were really tight in order to figure this out. I was at Radio Shack and I was at Hackinger's trying to find something to mount these Walkmen on and get like some parts that I could sort of expand the controls that are sort of condensed into the box and sort of expand them out so that I could have some actual controls to work from. And I built two of them, and I got a mixer, a little Radio Shack realistic mixer, and one day I finally found the confidence to roll up to MUC and show the crew what I'd been working on. And by that time I had been practicing a bit. I think I even had that. I had the original prototypes of those when I was at AIT, advanced training in the Army in like 95. So it was probably 97 or so before I finally had the confidence to actually take it out to anybody. But yeah, we had some fun with that, and I would have loved to have done more with it. But when I did it, when I rolled it out, we were really close to that next leapfrog point in technology where CDJs were starting to be a thing. Like no one thought of the idea of people being able to mix with anything other than records. So like tapes were kind of like this first thing, and it was kind of innovative. But right behind me, other companies had been working on doing stuff with CD players, and we were only a few years away at that point from Serato and those technologies. So it was a cool experiment because it was sort of just before all these other new ways to mix came about. But at the time, I was the only one that we knew about that had anything that was different than mixing from turntables. So yeah, for a little 2-year window, I had like the only other way of DJing that anybody knew about.
It sounds like we keep saying puzzles, but it feels like you've just been an engineer your whole life. Your whole life has been dedicated to building things, making things, and remaking them.
Yeah.
I wonder. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, I think that's why I went to college to, initially that was my major, engineering, and it seemed to fall in line. And part of it was just because there were things that were in my mind, ideas that were in my head that didn't exist yet. Like I said, when I said earlier that, I think I was born 10 years too early, it's because if I'd been born when once Photoshop or Adobe Creative Cloud was out in the world, then I probably wouldn't have had to be try to be such a hacker or a coder to write these things. Let me just use Photoshop. But when I was a kid, there was no Photoshop, there was no Premiere or Audition. So I was sitting there trying to figure out how to make my computer record sound, you know.
Well,
So
speaking of recording, Book wants to know basically if you're a hoarder. He said, do you still have the show that you debuted them on? And if you do, he said, I need that.
that's a good question, Book. I've got a huge archive of SoulController stuff, of all our old shows. I would go up to, that was part of my contribution to the show. I didn't mix a lot. I went up there as an engineer, as the show engineer. I'd do some hosting, and I'd be the archivist. So I'd go up there with my boombox every week, and I made sure I stayed deep enough in blank cassettes so that I could record all the shows. So from about 1995 through the end of our run at MUC, I probably have just about every show that we did. So somewhere in there is probably the debut. I think it might have been an anniversary that we debuted those at, one of our anniversaries in September of one of those years. So the answer is probably, and at some point I'm going to finish digitizing all of these tapes, and we're going to put those up somewhere where we can put those up legally and share them with the world. We can hear young Rosenberg perfecting his shtick, and hear young Aaron setting up some of the comedy that might manifest later in the Boondock Show and everything else, and you can hear Book tearing up, destroying vinyl like he's just nasty. Stylus and Elite and me trying to find like my radio chops. So yeah, there's a lot of growing that's going on. It's like even when I listen to some of those tapes now, I'm like, wow, we were kind of immature then. Like there was a lot of Natalie Hopkinson. She's a professor at Howard University, and she's an author. She wrote Deconstructing Tyrone and Go-Go Live. She's also a go-go historian. She wrote an article about us in the Washington Post about 1998 or 99. And, her focus in the article was kind of like, they find ways to make the show happen with all the janky equipment at WMUC. But yeah, when you actually listen to the show, it's kind of like, it's I don't know if she used the term toilet humor, but she was definitely inferred that it wasn't like, the most mature, most mature content that we were talking about, but the music was dope.
Well, she's also a commissioner for the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, and a huge advocate for not muting go-go. So don't mute DC.
Yes.
But so, because we've only got like 6 minutes left, and so we've gotten all the way up to college. So now we're about to jump to what got some of those gray hairs in your beard. So I got up on the screen the fact that you are the DTLR radio operations manager. How do you feel like all this full story? Like let's describe this narrative as like your journey to become the person you are today. How do you feel like all of that, those childhood experiences, those young adult experiences, those college experiences, have prepared you for the job that you do now?
I think it's in some ways, to me, it's kind of like self-evident. I sit there and I think about what I do at DTLR Radio, and it involves managing the equipment at our studio and making sure that the station is heard in our 250 stores in 19 states. And so there are parts of that job that touch on kind of all these things and all these experiences that I've picked up over the years. The puzzles are still there. I'm still trying to figure out, how a store can mess up their gear to the point that we need to send technicians out there to figure it out, what they've done to break their hardware. We're trying to figure out how to connect the DJ equipment and transmit this out over the internet. Like we're not using a satellite dish or a transmitter to send DTLR radio to the stores. We're using basically a shoutcast server. And so, all these are kind of like new, figure them out on the fly. There isn't a school where you learn this stuff. So I'm applying that all the time. There's repair things that tie into me trying to figure out how equipment works. At some point, I put a console in our main studio, and I had to wire it myself. And so it's sort of nonstop. It's still connecting to, it still echoes those things that I was doing in my bedroom, in 8th, 9th grade, tinkering around with my busted Commodore 64. So still doing like those electronic repairs. At some point, one of our computers went down, and my instant reflex and reaction is to like crack open the CPU and see if we can't figure out why it isn't working. And other folks would be like, "Yo, the computer's dead. Call the Geek Squad." I'm like, "No, Geek Squad. Like I'm the Geek Squad. I mean, let's take a look at it. Let's figure it out." And so, that's all still connected to what I'm doing today, and I'm still involved in what's happening musically on that station. We have a person responsible for the music direction on that show. I'm 46. That's why the grays are there. And my tastes as a hip hop head are a little bit different from the core demographic at a typical DTLR store. So I'm going to let other people be responsible for the music, but we still got to be plugged into what's happening musically. And so that's the Waxy Maxi thing is still part of my life, and detail and Flavor 1580 is still sort of part of my world, and that's in that same context.
It really feels like you're literally where you're supposed to be. That all the things you've done have literally prepared you for exactly what you're doing right now.
I'd have to agree, Mozzie. I think it wasn't a simple path. It wasn't a direct path. Like I said, I took the wrong major in college, and and there are other sort of like steps and stumbles along the way. But yeah, they all kind of set up, getting to doing something that sort of touches on all the things I'm really good at. What's that line about? Find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. It's that in a lot of ways where, there are days where I'm like, oh, like this lockdown has been tough. This current lockdown has been tough because I really want to be in the office. I really want to be in our studio. We're putting together a couple of studios. We're building a satellite studio in Chicago. We're building another one in Philadelphia. We're building a video studio at our home base in Baltimore. And what's actually holding me up is the fact that we kind of do these alternate days of in the office and work from home. I'm like, yo, you're doubling the time I need to get these studios up and running, getting these facilities up and running so that we can really kick tail and get DTR radio and our other projects up into the next gear. So yeah, I love being around that stuff.
So my last question as we get ready to wrap up, and it doesn't sound like even the setbacks were really setting you up for a comeback, but if you were going to give advice to yourself at a younger age, and it doesn't have to be like cheesy career advice, but just something you wish, if you could whisper it in your ear as a younger you, what's advice that you would give a younger you?
If it's anything, I think it's probably be patient. Like one sort of recurring theme that always seems to echo for me is there are things that I want, things I want to have. I want to be working with that like literally just don't exist yet. And I gotta learn how to, and I had to learn how to be patient enough. Because like I said, if instead of waiting for Photoshop to be developed, I'm writing programs trying to figure out how to draw circles. But and that took me down a great path because now I know how to code. But the ability to maybe just be a little bit more patient and wait for things to catch up with my vision and the things that I hope to see probably served me pretty well. One of the things that I think I've even said this to you, Mozzie, like when we talk about where technology is, where all the stuff that's in a typical studio now would have costed tens of thousands of dollars to be able to do an equivalent version of it some number of years before, and now like, oh, I've got a laptop and I've got a webcam, I can do a whole show. Being patient enough to wait for that to become for those gatekeeping restrictions to break down and be like, oh yeah, now I can do this over the internet with a webcam, with computer, and not have to invest in $100,000 of equipment in order to get it done. So yeah, just patience.
No doubt. So P.S. DJ Machete just chimed in. He said, "Salute, sirs.
We'll
be peeping the replay." Chimed in a little late. Shout out to Machete.
Shed Dog, yo, that's that Decipher fam. We barely even mentioned Decipher, and I know like the hour has flown by, but we barely even mentioned Decipher, which is sort of like a common theme that ties you, me, Book, Machete all together. Every Saturday, WPFW 89.3, 10 to midnight. We've been doing that show. Wow, it's going to be 16. What is it? 16 years this month.
That old? I'm only 18 years old.
I know. How'd you pull that off? You've been doing this since you were 3. Yeah, we've been on the air since 2005 at WPFW, and if I'm gonna be remiss if I don't acknowledge Ta-Nehisi Coates. He helped us push for that way back around the same time that Natalie wrote that article for us. Ta-Nehisi wrote an article for us in the Washington City paper where he sort of documented some of our struggle to try to get a hip hop show on WPFW, which at the time was very anti-hip hop. And he was one of those voices like, yo, there should be a hip hop show there. He went to the program director and he asked him why there's no hip hop there. And the program director at the time cussed him out. And that program director is dead now. And they speak of him in really reverent terms at WPFW. But to me, he's just the guy that like really hated on us being there.
Cold-blooded.
Yep.
Well, Bushhead, thank you. I want to thank you for this hour with us. I feel like I learned so much more about you, and really, to be honest, learned about the ways in which young people who are curious and do independent learning can still find their way to achieve the goals that they want.
And I didn't think I was that deep, so who knew? So.
Nah, bro. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for being the second participant in this alternative winter break, talking about the media arts. And thank you for the last 5 years of helping our interns and students learn about how to podcast. It's like all the ways you just described the way you work. Now it makes sense when you walk up in our office and I'm like, I don't know what cables go with this. And you just go and dig around and find, like, that's what you do.
That's what I do. Give me a puzzle, I'll figure it out, man. How do you like that Rodecaster, man? Like I've bought 15 of those for different people. Like that. Yeah. That's one of my favorite toys right now.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite podcaster tool so far.
Yeah, that thing's crazy.
No doubt. So thanks so much for tuning in. I just want to thank everybody for participating. We're going to close out. This is part of the Words Beats in Life alternative winter break. This is the inaugural alternative winter break. We've been for the last 6 years doing an alternative spring break, but this year we wanted to focus on media artists, people who are making content for television, for blogs and publishing. And it's all part of our Like a Boss curriculum where we're training young people to go into careers in arts management. And so we've got some amazing people. Next week on Monday, we're going to have Substantial and his wife participating in this conversation. Talking about the multimedia company that they built together. And I hope you're going to be able to be a part of that, especially if you're a young person that's interested in how to build a company. And even if you're not a young person, if you're adults or young adults who are looking at how to build partnerships, your wife or your husband could be a great partner if they're prepared. All right. So as we get ready to close out, I just want to play a couple of commercials encouraging you all to be a part of promoting the fact that Words Beats in Life Academy is back, and we're asking young people to join us by building their skills through hip hop. All right. We've got 10 spots left and classes start on February 2nd.
Picture this. Underneath the margins, your words can breathe. Got your listeners tilting isosceles the way you holding volcanic quills, spitting decrees. Better believe it flows like these. You got gills. Screaming at daffodils or dreaming in mandrills, derivative of skills. You're built in the workshop, rocking with raw. Cause in life, the woodshed don't stop. It don't stop. It don't stop. Don't stop. To the SP1200, the blue light bulb, to the board, the engineer's hands, and the limited wealth of patience. Hallelujah to everybody say ho, amen to all the ladies say ow. Thank God for make money, money, make money, money, and bless every hand that was ever put in the air. In your name, we pray. Some ideas, they shake you out of your sleep like when a toddler creeps. Totality of the deep, the mere thought of an unconscious manifestation carried out with the beat. Positive charged protons creating neural explosions. Time hiccups when fingers and pads touch. Dead air smiles because it knows what's coming. The counting is of the clock claps hands. The choreography of the knot slaps jams. And you be like, who made this? Vertebrae responding to the call so bad to make a B-girl curve the wall.